When Keanu Reeves spots a lonely girl buying diapers, he follows her and breaks down in tears. Where are you watching from? Please leave a comment below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more motivational stories, or reach our 1,000 subscribers to ensure you don't miss the conclusion of the story. In mid-December 2019, it was a cold evening in Los Angeles. Keanu Reeves, wearing his trademark black jacket and jeans, was waiting in line at a small convenience store to buy a bottle of water after a long day of filming. His mind was racing with ideas about the impending holidays when he noticed a young woman, no older than 25, clutching a pack of diapers and a carton of milk. Her eyes were red from crying, and her hands trembled as she reached into her purse to count her money. She looked nervously over her shoulder, as if worried that someone might follow her. Keanu couldn't help but notice the fatigue etched into her features, the kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying a load that is too heavy for one person to bear. She eventually paid for her purchases and left into the chilly night. Keanu was about to leave the store when he felt an uncontrollable sense of worry. He didn't know why, but he felt forced to follow her in silence. He crept out of the store and watched as she ran down the street while holding the bag closely. What could lead someone to do that? The girl, so young, so alone, to look so utterly broken. He trailed her from a distance, careful not to startle her. She walked several blocks before turning into a small apartment complex. Its exterior faded, and neglected Keanu hesitated, unsure if he should continue. But then he noticed something. She paused at the door, closed her eyes, and took a deep, shuddering breath. As though bracing herself for what lay ahead, he lingered in the shadows, torn between respecting her privacy and the nagging. Feeling that she needed help, finally curiosity and compassion won out. He watched as she stepped inside, leaving the door slightly ajar. A faint light spilled into the darkened street, and through the crack, he could hear the faint cries of a baby. What Keanu saw next shook him to his core. The girl, whom he guessed to be no older than 25, carefully placed the diapers and milk on a table cluttered with overdue bills and empty baby bottles. She then turned to the crib in the corner where a tiny infant lay. Fussing, "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Mommy's here." Keanu's heart ached as he watched her gently pick up the baby, holding it close as tears streamed down her face. He could hear her murmuring soft reassurances, though it was clear she was at her breaking point. What had happened to her, and why was she by herself? Keanu stepped away from the door slowly as his thoughts raced over the memories of his own previous losses. He wanted to help but didn't know how to approach her without frightening her. He couldn't just walk away because the sadness he felt from losing his partner and child so many years ago came rushing back. This wasn't a coincidence. Keanu silently promised himself that he would find a method to contact her the next day to let her know she wasn't alone. That night, Keanu Reeves paced his peaceful house, troubled by what he had seen. The young woman holding her infant, a strong reminder of a period of his life that he hardly ever talked about. He had once dreamed of a future filled with love, laughter, and the warmth of family, only to lose everything before it even started. Now, it seemed as though the universe was telling him to do something, but what could a stranger do without going too far? The following morning, he went back to the convenience store, where the clerk, an elderly man with gentle eyes, remembered Keanu from the night before and appeared shocked to see him again. Keanu inquired casually about the young lady. The shopkeeper sighed and shook his head when Des described her as the girl who bought diapers. "She has been coming here for a few months now, always by herself, and always making the same purchases." The clerk remarked quietly, "Diaper formula, sometimes ramen noodles, never anything for herself. I believe she lives a few blocks away, sweetie, but it's clear that life has been difficult for her." Keanu's heart fell because he could so clearly envision her face, those weary eyes that made him need to have the courage to help her. But he wasn't sure how to approach her without frightening her. He plucked up his courage and made the decision to wait that night. He parked his car discreetly close to the same apartment complex and waited until she reappeared. As dusk settled in, she did, and the baby was wrapped tightly in a worn pink blanket against the December chill. The woman's cheeks appeared thinner than he remembered. Her coat is too big for her petite body. Keanu, who was still sitting in his car, felt a knot in his throat as he watched her walk toward a nearby park and find a bench beneath a flickering street light. There, she rocked the baby in her arms and sang softly to the infant in a voice that was fragile but full of love. There was something about the scene that was unbearable. Quiet despair combined with unquestionable devotion. Getting brave. He got out of his car and approached her, his footsteps crunching, gently on the icy grass. But she didn't glance up until he was a few feet away. Startled, she tightened her grip on the infant and her eyes widened in terror. "I apologize." Keanu spoke softly, raising his hands to indicate he didn't mean any harm. "I saw you last night at the store, and I didn't mean to scare you," she said, her countenance softening somewhat but keeping her guard up. "Why were you following me?" she questioned, her voice shaking. Keanu paused. Unsure of how to explain himself without coming across as intrusive, he honestly said, "I just felt like you needed help." She looked away, her lips squeezing into a thin line, and her shoulders slumped as though the weight of those words had penetrated her barriers. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "You're right." Keanu spoke in a firm yet quiet voice. The only sound was the baby's gentle sing, and then, as if a dam had broken, tears fell down her cheeks. She tried to cover them by turning her face away, but her body trembled with silent sobs. "I don't, but I know what it's like to feel alone, and to love someone so much that it hurts for a moment." The woman took a trembling breath and finally looked at Keanu. "It's not just me," she whispered. "It's my daughter. She's all I have left." Keanu sat down on the bench next to her, giving her space, but remaining close enough to let her know he wasn't leaving whatever it is you're going through. "Tell me your story." Keanu murmured softly, nodding, his chest tightening as he listened, and she did the same. Her name was Emily, and she had been a straight A student at UCLA before her life took a terrible turn. She fell in love with a man she believed would be her forever, but he left her when she found out she was pregnant. She had no family to turn to, and her parents had disowned her when they learned she was expecting. Ever since she started working part-time at a diner during the day, leaving her little time or money for anything else, she had been struggling to make ends meet. I tried to remain strong for her. While looking down at her sleeping infant, Emily remarked, "Some days I just don't know if I can keep going." Keanu's eyes filled with tears as he told her story, which reflected a lot of the suffering he had gone through, including loss, loneliness, and a desperate need to cling to anything that gave life meaning. "You're stronger than you think," he said, his voice heavy with emotion, "but you don't have to do this alone." "Let me help you," Emily said, looking at him. With tears streaming down her face, she exclaimed, "Why would you want to help me?" with a look of appreciation and incredulity. Keanu grinned pitifully, "Because I know what it's like to need someone to believe in you even when you don't believe in yourself, and because someone once helped me when I thought I couldn't go on." Emily didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at her sleeping daughter and softened her name, saying, "Her name is Hope." Keanu's heart constricted as he murmured, "That's a beautiful name." His voice was hardly audible above a whisper, and then something changed. Two strangers who had been wounded by life's injustices sought comfort in one another. Keanu spent the next few days considering how he could support Emily without overburdening her. He knew that giving her money outright might make her feel awkward or even insulted, so instead he started small. The following evening, he showed up at the diner where Emily worked, sitting quietly in a corner. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt completely alone. This was only the beginning of their story, a story of healing, love, and finding light in the darkest corners of life. Booth's face lit up with a mixture of appreciation and astonishment when she saw him. After her shift, Keanu reluctantly consented to walk her home. She initially consented, and as they strolled, Keanu learned more about Emily's life. She talked about her aspirations prior to life's unexpected turn, including her desire to become a teacher and how motherhood, albeit unplanned, had given her a new purpose. She said that she hoped it would save me. Even on the most difficult days, Hope's voice trembles because she is the reason I continue. Keanu listened carefully, his heart bleeding for her hardships, but also in awe of her fortitude. Over the course of the following few weeks, their relationship grew stronger. Emily resisted, wondering why a famous man like Keanu Reeves would care so much about someone like her, but his generosity never wavered, and she gradually came to trust him. One snowy afternoon in January, Keanu surprised Emily and Hope with a trip to the park. As Emily watched Keanu gently push Hope on a swing, her heart swelled with emotion she hadn't felt in years. She had been so focused on survival that she had forgotten what it was like to feel safe and seen. That evening, as they made their way back to her apartment, Emily finally asked a question that had been on her mind for weeks. "Why me, Keanu? Keanu, why did you pick me out of everyone you could help?" Keanu paused his stride and turned to face her, his face compassionate yet serious as he stated, "I see a part of myself in you. I understand what it's like to feel like the world is closing in on you after losing everything, but I also know that sometimes it just takes one person to let you know you're not alone. You reminded me of both what I've lost and what I still have to offer." For the first time in years, Emily's eyes welled up with tears, and she gave herself permission to think that perhaps she was deserving of compassion and that she wasn't as broken as she had long believed. Keanu became more than just Emily's friend and hope. He became their family. He encouraged Emily to pursue her dream of becoming a teacher by helping her enroll in online classes. He was present for Hope's first words, her first steps, and every other little milestone. However, the greatest gift Keanu gave Emily wasn't money or even his time. Rather, it was a conviction that she could create a future for herself and her daughter, a future full of possibilities and hope. One evening as they watched Hope play with a set of toy blocks, Emily turned to face Keanu and exclaimed, "You've changed our lives," in an emotionally charged voice. Keanu grinned, his eyes gleaming. "You've changed?" My eyes also shone. The two of them sat in silence, their unspoken bond growing stronger with every moment that went by. Neither of them knew what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. They had discovered something special and lovely in one another. Not just love, but a shared understanding of life's frailty and the strength it takes to keep going. Their story wasn't just one of survival or even romance. It was one of healing, rediscovering the beauty in life's flaws, and finding family in the most unlikely places. Although their journey was far from over, Keanu and Emily knew that they could face whatever came next. Theirs was a tale of love in all its forms, a love that endured, healed, and promised a better tomorrow.